This story is fictionalized and dramatized for storytelling effect. My brother uninvited me from his wedding by email. There was no phone call. There was no conversation. There was only a digital message sent, while my parents sat a few feet away whispering over seating charts for a ceremony to which I was suddenly a stranger. "It is better if you do not come," Marcus wrote. "New York is expensive, and honestly, you are just the driver. I know you do not have money like that. Do not even try. If you want to attend, just watch the video." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, letting each word settle into place like stones dropped into still water. My mother went completely silent when I showed her the screen. My father traced the grain of the wooden table, his eyes refusing to meet mine, as if the timber might explain something he did not want to say out loud. No one defended me. No one even spoke my name. I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply closed my laptop and waited for the air in the room to break. Nothing. I called my mother that night, searching for a name for the truth. She picked up and immediately began describing floral centerpieces. "Did you read his email?" I interrupted. The line went hollow. "Let us not make this bigger than it needs to be, Sarah. He is stressed. You know how he gets it. He said I am just the driver. He said I am too poor to be there." "Well," she said slowly, her voice thinning, "maybe it is better if you sit this one out. Less stress for everyone. Less stress for everyone. As if my presence were a debt to be settled. As if my feelings were merely a minor interruption in the more important life of Marcus Miller. Mom, do you know where the money for this wedding is actually coming from?" Another pause followed, longer this time. I could hear the faint shuffle of her slippers on the floor, a restless, guilty sound. "We will talk about this later," she said finally. "Just do not make a scene." She hung up before I could respond. 2 days later, while my family was in Manhattan, finalizing the arrangements, my phone rang. It was not the venue, and it was certainly not my brother. It was my father. His voice, usually a pillar of authority, sounded strained and brittle. "The final transfer has not been cleared," he said, skipping any greeting. "The venue is breathing down Marcus's neck. You need to move the funds into the family account immediately." "Why? What do you mean why we cannot have him?" looking embarrassed in front of his in-laws. "The Sterlings are very particular about these things." I looked at my laptop where the email still glowed like a wound that refused to close. "Dad, did you read what Marcus wrote to me? I do not have time for this. Just handle the transfer. He called me just the driver. He said I am too poor to attend his wedding, the wedding I have been paying for." Silence followed. It was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of calculation. "Sarah, we can discuss family dynamics later. Right now I need you to—" "Does Marcus know?" I asked quietly. "Does he know that every deposit, every vendor payment, every upgrade he requested, all of it came from my account?" My father cleared his throat, a dry, uncomfortable sound. "He knows it is family money." "It is not family money. It is my money, from my business, the one you call those delivery things." "Sarah, does he know Dad?" The silence stretched so long I thought the connection had failed. "He does not need to know the details," my father finally said. "What matters is that the family supports each other." I almost laughed. The family supports each other. Except the support only ever flowed in one direction out of my accounts and into their illusions, while I remained invisible. Growing up, Marcus was the investment. He was sent to prestigious schools while I stayed behind to hold the household together. When he moved to New York to work in finance, our parents spoke of him as if he had already conquered the world. Meanwhile, I stayed in our hometown, built a logistics company from the dirt up, and became a ghost. In my family, visibility mattered more than contribution. Marcus brought stories of Manhattan. I brought wire transfers for which no one thanked me, because I always sent the money to my father. First, Marcus believed it was a nest egg our parents had built specifically for him. He had no idea that every luxury in his life was being funded by the sister he considered a financial burden. When the wedding planning started, I was excluded from the conversations, but included in the invoices. My mother would call and say, "The deposit is due Friday. You will take care of it, right?" It was never a question. It was a statement. And I did it every time, assuming that being the foundation would eventually be noticed. That was my first mistake. "I will handle it, Dad. I said into the phone, my voice as neutral as his silence. "Good. I knew we could count on you." He hung up without a goodbye. I set the phone down and walked to my window. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long, sharp shadows across my driveway, where 3 of my company trucks sat waiting for tomorrow's routes. Each one represented a contract I had won, a client I had served, a reputation I had built with my own hands. Marcus thought I was just the driver. My parents thought I was just the bank. None of them had ever asked what I had built while they were looking the other way. I did not mean I would send the money. I meant I would finally stop the engine. My brother had uninvited me from his wedding because he thought I was a nobody. But he forgot one thing: I was the one keeping the world he loved so much in motion. I looked at the trucks one more time, then pulled out my phone and blocked my father's number. For the first time in my life, I was ready to walk away from the wheel. The morning after the email, I woke up to 17 unread messages. Not one of them mentioned what Marcus had written. There were no apologies, only reminders and demands. My mother's message sat at the top, sent at exactly 6:15 a.m. "Do not forget to send the transfer to your father today. The caterer needs confirmation by noon. This is the big one, honey. Do not be late." I stared at those words until my eyes burned. I had been uninvited from the wedding less than 24 hours ago, and here she was still expecting me to fund the very event I was deemed too poor to attend. I went straight to my home office and pulled up the master spreadsheet. Every vendor, every deposit, and every hidden fee was categorized with the cold precision of a forensic accountant. All of it was funded through my business revenue, then funneled through my father's account to keep the fiction of their wealth alive. For years, I had watched the systematic erosion of my own life in neat columns. Years ago, my father asked for a small loan to help Marcus with rent in Manhattan. That loan became a monthly allowance. The allowance became family savings. Marcus grew up believing our parents were secret millionaires, while I was just the daughter who stayed behind to drive vans. By 9 o'clock, I drove to my warehouse. The air hummed with the rhythm of heavy machinery and the distant beeping of trucks backing into loading bays. My business employed 23 people and managed 3 major regional contracts. My parents called it those delivery things. They never asked about revenue. Knowing would mean admitting that the golden child's life was subsidized by the sister he looked down on. My phone rang at 10:30. It was Mom. "Did you send the transfer yet?" she asked, skipping any greeting. "I am looking at the portal now," I said. "Good. Your father needs to clear it by noon. This has to be perfect for Marcus." I gripped the edge of my desk. "Mom, did you actually read his email? He said I am too poor to attend. He called me just the driver." A long silence followed, then a sharp, impatient sigh. "Let us not make this bigger than it needs to be. He is stressed. He is marrying into a very prominent family." "He still thinks this is your money," I said, my voice dropping. "You have let him believe for 10 years that I do not contribute a cent. We will deal with the details later." Her tone sharpened into an order. "Just send the transfer. Your brother is counting on us." Counting on us. Not on me. She still could not say the words. I understood then. They did not defend me because defending me meant exposing themselves. If they told Marcus I was paying for his life, they would have to admit they were broke. They chose his ego over my dignity. At 11:15, a crisis hit the floor. Truck 7 had a mechanical failure, stalling a major shipment for our largest client. My manager rushed in panic in his voice. "Sarah Richmond is going to pull the contract if we miss this window." I closed my banking portal and stood up. I did not need a spreadsheet to know my fleet status. Reroute the Henderson delivery to tomorrow, get truck 12 to base 6, and start the reload immediately. I ordered, my voice calm, as the chaos swirled around me. "I will handle the client personally. Move." For the next 45 minutes, I coordinated the recovery. While others saw a crisis, I saw a puzzle. By noon, the replacement shipment was on the road. Crisis solved. That is what I do. I solve problems while others create them. As I walked back to my office, a text from my father appeared. "The venue is asking for the final balance. Move the funds now. Do not make this difficult. We are waiting." I sat down and looked at the clock. 12:10 p.m. The deadline had passed. I opened my banking app and stared at the pending transfer, the final payment for catering flowers and luxury lighting. This was the one that would make the lie complete. My father was counting on the daughter he considered mediocre to protect the pride of the son who considered her a hired hand. I did not cancel the transfer. I did not send it either. I simply logged out, closed the laptop, and turned off my office lights. I stood in the doorway and watched my trucks pull out into the afternoon sun, each one a contract I had won, a reputation I had built. They thought the engine would run forever. I walked to my car, drove home, and when my phone started ringing, I placed it face down on the kitchen counter. For the first time in 6 months, I let it ring. 3 days after the email, an automated reminder appeared in my inbox. The final balance for Riverside events was due within 48 hours. The amount glowed on my screen, $47,000. 10 minutes later, my mother's text arrived like clockwork. Make sure the transfer goes through today. Marcus says the venue coordinator is being very firm. No glitches. No mention of the email, no apology, just another instruction. I didn't reply. Instead, I did something I had never done in the 6 months since this wedding circus began. I opened my accounting software and ran a full payment history report. The numbers told a story of systematic exploitation. First, the Essentials venue deposit catering installments and the bridal suite upgrade. Then came what I called the vanity list, where logic ended and entitlement began. There were lighting adjustments because Marcus felt the standard package was too provincial for his New York associates. There were rare orchids because the bride's mother preferred them over the lilies I had already funded. There was a cinematic drone package to capture a ceremony I would only see through a screen. The total $127,000. It was money that could have bought 3 new trucks for my fleet. It was money that could have funded the county expansion I'd been forced to delay. None of these payments had Marcus's name on them. To him, this was family legacy. He lived in a fantasy where our parents had endless cash, and they had fostered that fantasy using my success to buy his love while keeping me invisible. My phone rang. Marcus. I could hear the background noise of a high-end tailor shop scissors snipping hushed voices and the soft rustle of expensive fabric. Dad says you're being slow with the transfer again. His voice was casual, distracted. I'm at my final fitting. Just handle it, would you? Do you even know where this money comes from? He laughed. From Mom and Dad's savings. They worked hard so I could represent the family properly. Why, and what exactly do you think I do? You manage their accounts or whatever. Look, Sarah, Dad said this money is so I can start my new life at the right caliber. I can't look like a deadbeat in front of the Sterlings. He paused, and I heard him murmur something to the tailor. Honestly, it's probably better you're not coming. If you showed up in your work clothes talking about fuel prices, it would just embarrass everyone. I embarrass everyone. Don't be dramatic. Just do your job and send the wire. He hung up without a goodbye. An hour later, my parents called together on speakerphone. I could picture them huddled over the kitchen table rehearsing their lines. Sweetheart, my father began, his voice carefully measured. We need to protect Marcus's confidence right now. If he knew he was relying on delivery money from his sister, it would destroy his self-esteem before his big day. What about my self-esteem? Silence. Why are you letting him treat me like a hired driver while I fund his orchids? My mother jumped in. It's just money, Sarah. Don't be small-minded about this. Family is more important than dollars. Then why isn't my family protecting me? We'll make it up to you after the wedding, my father said quickly. Right now we just need you to what? Keep pretending. I'm nothing, so Marcus can keep pretending he's something. Sarah. My mother's voice turned cold. Send the transfer. I looked at my screen where the payment portal waited. One click and the lie would continue. I navigated to the bank's administrative options. I selected the pending transfer, and then I clicked Internal Audit Hold. A notification appeared. Transaction paused for 48-hour verification. The sound was just a simple digital chime, but it felt like a gunshot in the quiet of my office. To my father, it would look like a banking glitch. To the venue expecting clean funds by the end of the day, it would look like a red flag. I closed my laptop and walked down to the warehouse floor. I helped my team load the final shipment of the day, checking manifests, double-checking cargo weights, and doing the work that actually paid for everything my family took for granted. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Then again. I didn't look. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun go down. My phone had 17 missed calls and 23 unread messages. They wanted a wedding built on lies. They wanted me to be the driver waiting in the car while they enjoyed the party. I had officially turned off the engine. They were about to find out how far they could get on an empty tank. The first call came from an unknown New York number. I listened to the voicemail while standing at my office window. A woman named Ims. Thorne from Riverside Events spoke, her voice professionally neutral. "I'm following up on the outstanding balance for the Miller reception. We'll need confirmation by the end of business today to maintain the reservation." There was no accusation. It was just a matter-of-fact reminder that a gear in a machine had stopped turning. 20 minutes later, the wedding planner emailed. She hadn't received final payment confirmation. She asked if there had been a change in the point of contact, noting that previous transactions had always been seamless. A change in the point of contact. The outside world was beginning to notice the gap where I used to stand. The ghost who signed the checks was no longer responding. I returned neither message. By mid-afternoon, the family firewall cracked. My father called. "Have you handled everything yet?" There was no hello. There was no inquiry about my well-being. There was just the only question I'd been asking for the last decade. "What do you mean by everything?" There was a sharp intake of breath. "The venue is called Marcus. Marcus called me. The family funds haven't been cleared. What's going on?" "I'm not sure. What did Marcus say?" "He's panicking, Sarah. The Sterlings are asking questions." My father's voice carried a jagged edge of anxiety he was trying and failing to mask. "Is something wrong with the account? Is there a reason to believe something's wrong?" Silence. I could almost hear him recalibrating, trying to find a way to order me to send the money without acknowledging what he was actually asking. "Just make sure it's taken care of," he said finally, defaulting to his sternest tone. "We don't need any problems right now." He hung up before I could respond. An hour later, Marcus called. His voice was tight, the controlled pitch of someone terrified of losing composure in public. "What's going on with the payment? It didn't go through." Heavy silence followed. I could almost hear his brain failing to process information that didn't fit his expectations. "What do you mean it didn't go through? I mean, I never said I would handle this one. You always handle it. Did you actually ask me to help, or did you just assume the driver would keep the car running forever?" He was breathing hard now, grasping for words that would force me back into my role. "This isn't funny, Sarah." "I'm not laughing." "You're making me look bad." "No, I'm simply not covering for you anymore." "What the hell is that supposed to?" "It means exactly what it sounds like, Marcus. You uninvited me from your wedding because you thought I was too poor to attend. You called me just the driver. And now you're calling to ask why the driver isn't paying for your party. That email wasn't, I didn't mean, you meant every word, and I heard you." The line went dead. The rest of the afternoon passed in strange silence. There were no messages from my mother. There was no follow-up from my father. I knew what was happening. They were regrouping, having frantic conversations about me without me trying to figure out how to fix the problem I had become. They were searching for another way to fund the lie, only to find every path led back to the sister they had dismissed. That evening, the final blow landed. An email from venue management arrived addressed to my parents and CC'd to Marcus and me. The final balance for the Miller Sterling reception remains outstanding. Payment must be received within 48 hours to avoid cancellation of services. Please advise who will be responsible for this payment going forward. The email did what no phone call had accomplished. It made the situation visible to people outside the family. It created a paper trail. It asked a question that could no longer be dodged or lied about in private. Who will be responsible? I watched the receipts appear one by one. Marcus, my mother, my father. All of them were reading the same cold, hard facts. All of them realized that the invisible hand holding their world together had finally let go. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "We need to talk." I read it. I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, my silence wasn't being ignored. It was the entire problem. The next evening, my phone rang. It was my mother, but she didn't call the way she usually did, rapid, impatient, already mid-thought by the time I answered. This time she let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. As if she wasn't sure I would pick up. As if she wasn't sure which version of me would answer. I let it ring a 4th time before pressing the button. "Hello, Mom." "Sarah, do you have a minute to talk?" Those 6 words stopped me cold. I couldn't remember her ever asking for my time before. She usually spoke to me the way one speaks to a light switch, assuming the room would brighten on command. "I'm here," she exhaled slowly. It was not the irritated sigh of a woman burdened by my presence, but something heavier. Defeat. "Things have gotten complicated." A pause. "The venue is being difficult. The planner keeps asking questions. Marcus is overwhelmed." She stopped in the exact place where reassurance usually lived, the empty space where I normally stepped in to fix everything. The moment where I was expected to say, "I'll handle it." I said nothing. "Sarah, are you still there?" "I'm here. I'm just not sure what you want me to say." She caught herself. "I'm not trying to pressure you. I need to understand what's happening. What's happening is that I'm stepping back. Stepping back from everything. The payments, the planning, the silent role everyone assigned me without ever asking if I agreed to it." A long pause followed. I could hear her weighing her words, trying to shape them into something that would move me without giving too much away. "If you're not involved," she said carefully, "things are much harder than I expected." I let that admission sit between us. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even full recognition of my worth. But it was the closest she had ever come to admitting I mattered. "The difficulty isn't my fault, Mom. I'm not blaming you. But you're also not saying it isn't my fault." Silence. She was walking that familiar tightrope, trying to keep the wedding intact without making anyone accountable for the invisible strings that had been holding it together. "We'll talk more later," she said finally. "Just think about it." She hung up before I could respond. Later that night, Marcus called. His voice was different, quieter. The arrogant confidence that usually coded every sentence was missing, as if he'd set it down somewhere in Manhattan and couldn't find it. "Can we talk? We're talking now. I mean, really talk. About what's happening." I waited for him to find the courage to say it. "I need your help," he said finally. "Just this once. You uninvited me from your wedding, Marcus. Sarah, you called me just the driver. You said I didn't have the kind of money to be in your presence. And now you're asking for my help." The silence that followed was thick with the effort of not admitting his lies out loud. "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered. "Then what did you mean?" "Nothing. What exactly did you mean when you told me to watch the video from home because I was too poor to attend? I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking clearly enough to write an email. You were thinking clearly enough to press send." "Look, I just need—" He stopped recalibrating. "The venue needs payment. The planner needs confirmation. I need help getting the logistics back on track." "In what capacity would I be helping? What do you mean? What role am I playing in your life, Marcus? Am I your sister, your accountant, your driver?" He hesitated, searching for a response that would get him what he wanted without changing anything. "You're my sister," he said finally. "That wasn't your answer a week ago." The call ended shortly after. There was no resolution. There was no genuine apology. There was just the quiet recognition on both sides that something had shifted permanently. The old rules no longer applied. That night, the family group chat lit up. Messages came from my mother, my father, and Marcus, but none were directed at me. There were vague statements about working things out and coming together as a family. The tone was softer than it had ever been, but the intent remained the same. They wanted to restore what they'd lost without naming the cost I had paid. "Mom, We should all get on a call tomorrow. Clear the air. Dad agreed. Family first. Marcus, I'm open to whatever works. They were no longer issuing orders. They were making requests not because they finally understood my value, but because they had no other choice. I read every message. I didn't respond to any of them. The next morning, Marcus sent a final text. I'll figure it out, but let me know if you change your mind. I looked at those words for a long time. Let me know if you change your mind, as if my decision was in a mood, as if my boundaries were a negotiation. I set the phone down and got ready for work. For the first time in my life, they didn't know if they could count on me. That uncertainty terrified them. They were finally beginning to realize that the foundation they had ignored was no longer willing to be walked upon. The apology arrived 2 days later. A text from Marcus popped up while I was reviewing quarterly fuel taxes. I'm sorry if the email upset you. I stared at that single word. If. It was a masterclass in non-apology. He wasn't apologizing for his cruelty. He was apologizing for the inconvenience of my reaction to it. My hurt was just a technical glitch in his wedding planning that needed patching. I didn't respond. I let the message sit in the digital void while I finished my workday, finding a strange satisfaction in letting him wait. That evening, a group call came through, coordinated. My parents and Marcus all connected at once. My mother spoke first, her voice carefully pitched to sound light and breezy. We thought it might help to talk, clear the air. What exactly needs clearing? The wedding, the email, the confusion. Confusion. The word landed like a scalpel. It was a brilliant vocabulary choice designed to strip away reality, as if the words Marcus had written were somehow ambiguous. There's nothing confusing about it, Mom. He uninvited me because he decided my presence was a liability. His email wasn't stressful, it was a deliberate choice. My father stepped in, using that heavy baritone he always employed to settle disputes in Marcus's favor. He was under immense pressure. People say things they don't truly mean when they're stressed. Did he also not mean it when he asked me to keep paying for the reception? Does the stress only apply to his kindness, or does it also apply to his greed? Silence followed. It was strategic, not awkward. I could almost hear them recalibrating. Marcus broke first, sounding more irritated than chastened. I already apologized. You apologized for my reaction, not for your actions. Those aren't the same thing. What do you want me to say? The truth. I want you to admit you wanted my money but not my presence. I want you to acknowledge you treated me like a function instead of a person. There was another shift on the line, a quiet recalculation. They weren't trying to understand my pain. They were trying to restore the balance without changing the underlying structure. Marcus tried a different angle. Can we just get through the wedding first? You can come if you want. We'll deal with the personal stuff afterward. I just need help getting the final details over the line. So, you want my help now and my dignity at some unspecified time in the future. That's not reconciliation, Marcus. That's a rescue. I'm trying here, Sarah. No, you're trying to get what you need while giving nothing in return. That's what you've always done. My mother jumped back, and her voice tightening with a desperate edge. Nobody's trying to disrespect you. We just want the whole family together for Marcus's big day. I'm family when there's a bill to pay. I'm just the driver when it's time to celebrate. Dead silence. That's not fair, Marcus said quietly. You wrote those words, not me. You pressed send. And Mom and Dad sat in the next room and said nothing. I let that hang in the air. So don't tell me what's fair. The call ended without resolution. It was the same dismissal I'd lived with for 20 years, only now softened by a thin layer of superficial concern. Later that night, Marcus sent one final text. Are you going to help or not? There was no pretense. There was no softening. There was just naked entitlement. He still believed my refusal was a logistical problem to be solved, not a consequence of his own behavior. I didn't reply. I turned on Do Not Disturb and put my phone in a drawer. By morning, the messages had shifted from insistence to frantic urgency. Requests replaced demands. But not one message contained the words that actually mattered. No one said I was right. No one said they were wrong. They thought a hollow apology would be enough to restore the ground beneath them. It wasn't. I woke to a phone vibrating with desperate energy. 14 missed calls, 26 texts, 3 voicemails, all from the same 3 people. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I got out of bed and followed the routine that had built my life while they were busy decorating theirs. Coffee, laptop, logistics manifest. My business was moving forward regardless of whether my family was ready to face the truth. I had 3 new contracts starting next week. My warehouse manager was already asking about hiring additional drivers. I spent an hour in a world that responded to effort and expertise instead of entitlement and lies. The call from the outside world came just after 9. "Ms. Miller, this is Ms. Thorne from Riverside Events." Her voice was calm and professional, possessing that unmistakable sharp New York edge. "I'm calling to confirm some details regarding the Miller-Sterling reception. We're reviewing our records and need to clarify certain roles." "I'm listening." "You've been our primary point of contact for payment processing for several months, but we received a rather frantic message from your brother this morning indicating there might be changes to the billing structure." A pause. "Before we proceed, we need to confirm, are you the decision maker for this event?" There it was, the question no one had been forced to ask until I stopped absorbing the impact. For a brief moment, I saw the alternative. I could smooth it over. I could frame it as a banking glitch. I could authorize the wire and make the world quiet again. Then I thought about the email, the word driver. How quickly I would erase my own existence if I fixed this for them now. "I'm glad you called," I said. "I need to clarify something. I am not the decision maker. I've only assisted with previous transfers as a personal courtesy to my parents. I'm not responsible for the planning or finances going forward." A controlled pause followed. "I see. Our records show all deposits and vendor payments originated from your accounts. We had assumed you were the principal guarantor." "I understand why you'd think that, but I have no contractual obligation to the venue. My brother and parents are the organizers. They're the appropriate contacts for financial matters." "Understood." Her voice remained neutral, but I heard the recalculation happening on the other end. "We'll follow up with your brother directly. I should mention that without payment confirmation by the end of business today, we'll have to proceed according to contract terms, which includes cancellation of services." "I understand completely. Is there anything else you'd like us to note in the file?" "Just that I'm no longer involved. Thank you for calling." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, from release. It was as if a decade of reflexive problem-solving had finally slipped off my shoulders. I hadn't attacked anyone. I hadn't made accusations. I had simply stopped intervening. The reaction was immediate. Marcus called 4 times in a row. Then a barrage of texts came, then more calls. I answered the 5th attempt. "What the hell did you tell them?" His voice was tight and barely controlled. "The truth. You told them you weren't responsible. They called me Sarah, right in front of Amanda and her mother. They asked if I was prepared to take over payment immediately. Do you have any idea how that sounded? Do you have any idea how it sounds that you planned a wedding you couldn't afford and expected me to keep your insolvency invisible? I'm not insolvent. Then pay for it yourself." Silence followed, heavy and furious. "You're humiliating me." "No, I'm just not volunteering to be your safety net anymore." "That's the same thing." "It's really not Marcus. You built a life you can't sustain. You told everyone, including your fiancé's family, that you were successful and independent. And now someone's asking you to prove it. That's not my fault. That's reality catching up. This is revenge. This is about that stupid email. This is about 20 years of me paying for a life you convinced yourself you earned. The email just made it clear you'd never see me as anything but the help." He hung up. The dial tone echoed in my office. My mother called next. "Sarah." Her voice was soft and unsteady. There was none of the usual performative cheer. "There must be some mistake. Please tell me you sent the wire to your father's account." "There's no mistake, Mom. I told the venue that Marcus is the responsible party. But he doesn't have that kind of money available." "Then the wedding costs more than he can afford." How can you say that this is your brother? The same brother who uninvited me because he thought I was too poor to attend. Silence. Then quietly, he didn't mean it like that. You keep saying that, but no one ever explains what he did mean, because there's no version of that email that isn't exactly what it looks like. She started to cry, the soft, manipulative tears I'd heard 100 times before. You're destroying this family. No, Mom, I'm just not holding it together anymore. There's a difference. I hung up before she could respond. My father didn't call. He sent a single text. I expected better from you. Fix this. I looked at the message, then out the window where my trucks were loading on schedule. In my world, work continued because accountability existed. I didn't reply. By noon, the administrative hold expired. I didn't cancel the transfer. I didn't push it through either. I simply let the system run its course. That evening, a formal email arrived, CC'd to everyone involved. Riverside Events has updated billing records for the Miller-Sterling reception. Marcus Miller is now listed as the sole responsible party. The attached invoice requires confirmation within 24 hours. Co-signers have been notified. The co-signers now included the Sterling family. I saved the email and closed my laptop. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't tried to explain myself to people who'd spent 20 years refusing to listen. I had simply stopped managing a lie that benefited everyone except me. That night I sat on my porch as the sun went down. My phone buzzed somewhere inside the house, but the sound felt distant, unimportant. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for consequences. I had already accepted them. I was no longer the driver. I had stepped out of the car. Whatever happened to the passengers was no longer mine to absorb. A few days after the venue fallout, a message appeared outside the chaos of the family group chat. Private, just from my mother. Can we talk, just the two of us? I'm worried about you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Even after everything, after the years of being overlooked, after the email, after the humiliation, there was still a small, stubborn part of me that craved a mother who would choose me. I agreed to the call. Her voice was softer than I'd heard in weeks. Gone was the sharp, demanding tone of the wedding coordinator. In its place was something gentler, the voice she usually reserved for comforting Marcus. How are you really doing, sweetheart? She spent 10 minutes asking about my life. Small things, tender things. When did I last take a day off? Was I eating properly? How was the business handling the expansion? For a brief window, it felt like she was finally seeing me, not as a source of funds, not as a logistical solution, as her daughter. Then carefully she broached the subject. Things have been so hard between you and Marcus. It breaks my heart to watch. It doesn't have to be this way, Mom. I know. A pause. I understand how you feel. Maybe more than I've let on. Marcus can be blind sometimes. He gets so focused on the horizon that he forgets to look at who's walking beside him. Something flickered in my chest. Hope. Fragile and unfamiliar. I just want him to see me as a person, I said quietly. I don't want him to fail. I never wanted that. I've spent so many years holding everything together, and no one ever noticed. No one ever said thank you. I hear you, Sarah. I really do. It felt like I was invisible, like I was only real when there was a bill to pay. That must have been so lonely. I felt my throat tighten. It was. She listened. She made soft sounds of understanding. And for the first time in 20 years, I let my guard down completely. I told her everything. The years of feeling erased the exhaustion of being the foundation. No one acknowledged the pain of watching them celebrate Marcus while I sat invisible at the end of the table. I'll talk to him, she promised. I'll help him understand. He needs to know how much he's hurt you. I went to bed that night, feeling something I hadn't felt in years understood. The next afternoon, my phone rang. Marcus. I answered, expecting a humble brother, an olive branch, maybe even an apology. Instead, his voice hit me like ice water. Mom told me you're feeling used. I froze. She said you've been keeping some kind of mental tally of everything you've ever done for the family, that you're throwing it in our faces because you're stressed about your business. He laughed a cold, dismissive sound. Are you seriously that petty? The betrayal landed like a blade between my ribs. That's not what I said. She told me you're fragile right now, that I should be patient with you because you're not yourself. His tone turned condescending. Look, if you need a plaque or a trophy to feel appreciated, I'll buy you one after the wedding. But can you please stop the drama so I can get through this week? I couldn't speak. My mother hadn't gone to him to defend me. She had gone to report on my emotional state, repackaging my legitimate pain as a breakdown. She had used my truth to make him feel like the bigger person for tolerating his difficult sister. I'm not stressed, Marcus, and I meant every word I said. Sure you did. He hung up. I sat in the silence of my office for a long time. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a fool. I had handed the keys to my heart to the person who had spent 20 years ignoring me, and I was surprised when she handed them to the person who had spent 20 years stepping on it. My mother hadn't betrayed me out of malice. She had betrayed me out of convenience. To her, my pain was just a variable to be managed, a problem to be neutralized so the wedding could stay on track. That evening, the family group chat came alive. Dad, we'll handle the remaining logistics. Sarah needs time to decompress. Marcus agreed. We don't need any more interruptions. Mom, let's just focus on the wedding. She'll come around. They were talking about me in the third person, as if I were a ghost, a problem they had successfully managed by convincing themselves I was simply unwell. I looked at the button to leave the group. In the past, the idea would have terrified me, a final severance of the only connection I had. But as I watched them erase my personhood in real time, I realized I wasn't leaving a family. I was leaving a cage. I pressed the button. Within minutes, the private messages started. Mom, why did you leave? We were just getting things settled. Dad, this is immature, Sarah. Get back in the chat. Marcus still with the theatrics. I didn't respond to any of them. Leaving wasn't a play for attention. It was self-preservation. The only way to stop being betrayed was to stop being available for the betrayal. I set my phone on this counter and walked out to my porch. The evening was quiet, still. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like something I was obligated to fill. It felt like freedom. The days that followed were strangely quiet. There was no barrage of messages. There were no desperate phone calls. There was just a thick, unfamiliar silence stretching across the distance between me and my family. I went back to work with renewed intensity. 3 new contracts, 2 driver interviews, a meeting with the county planning board about expanding our routes. I reminded myself every hour that my life existed far beyond the narrow boundaries of their expectations. Then one morning, an email appeared that changed everything. It wasn't from my family. It was from Julia Thorne, the wedding planner. Ms. Miller, I wanted to reach out directly because there seems to be some confusion regarding payment coordination for the upcoming event. Our records indicate you've been handling transfers, but recent communications with your brother and father suggest a lack of clarity about roles. Before we proceed or before the venue takes further action, I'd like to understand your actual involvement in this process. Would you be available for a brief call? It was a direct question, honest, no assumptions. It was more respect than I'd received from my own family in 20 years. I called her that afternoon. Ms. Thorne, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate you asking me directly instead of making assumptions. Of course, we prefer total clarity in our operations. Her voice was professional but warm. I have to be honest, when the payments stopped arriving, we noticed immediately. The efficiency of the previous months had been remarkable. Everything on time, every detail confirmed. And then suddenly nothing. I can explain that. Please. I took a breath. I was funding the payments through my father's account because no one else in the family was taking financial responsibility. But I was never the decision maker. I was never part of the formal planning. I was just... I paused, searching for the right words. The silent logistics provider in the background. There was a long pause on the other end. That's not the impression we had, Julia said carefully. Based on the communication patterns and the precision of the payments, we assumed you were overseeing the entire operation. The vendors all assumed the same. I understand why you would think that. Ms. Miller, can I be candid with you? Please. When your involvement stopped, the difference was immediate and obvious. Deadlines started slipping. Communications became confused. Your brother seemed genuinely unaware of basic details that had been handled flawlessly for months. She paused. Whoever was running this before, and I'm now understanding that was you, they were exceptional at it. I felt something shift in my chest. It was a warmth I hadn't expected. Thank you for saying that. I'm just stating what I observed. The contrast made it very clear. Another pause. I'm sorry if I'm overstepping, but it seems like your contribution wasn't exactly acknowledged. I almost laughed. No, it wasn't. Well, for what it's worth, we noticed, and I wanted you to know that. Later that day, a follow-up email went out. I was CC'd. Dear Mr. Miller and Mr. Miller Sr., this message confirms the change in point of contact for the Miller-Sterling reception. Please verify who will be handling logistics and financial authorizations going forward, as the primary coordinator has stepped back from involvement. Attached updated invoice requiring confirmation within 24 hours. Please note that all previous payments were processed through accounts associated with Ms. Sarah Miller. Future payments should be arranged through the appropriate responsible party. It was brief, factual, devastating. It made visible what my family had tried so hard to keep hidden. They had been relying on me all along, and now everyone knew it. Marcus called within the hour. Why does the planner think you were handling everything? His voice was high and defensive, the confusion of a man who still didn't understand where the money came from. Because I was. What? She thinks I was handling everything, because that's exactly what happened, Marcus. Every payment, every confirmation, every vendor coordination. That was me. Sharp silence followed. You didn't have to tell her that. I didn't have to lie for you either. You're making me look. I'm not making you look like anything. I'm just not covering for you anymore. There's a difference. The Sterlings are going to see that email. Amanda's mother is going to see it. Good. Good? How is that good? Because now they'll know the truth, and you'll have to figure out how to handle that on your own. He hung up without another word. That night I sat on my porch as the sun went down. Julia's words kept playing in my mind. The contrast made it very clear. We noticed. For weeks I had felt invisible, dismissed, reduced to a function by the people who were supposed to love me most. But here was a stranger, a professional with no stake in our family drama, who had seen my contribution clearly. She didn't need to call me. She hadn't needed to acknowledge what I'd done. But she did. She had given me something my family was incapable of providing recognition. I realized then that I didn't need them to understand me. I just needed them to stop speaking for me. For the first time, someone had asked me a question directly, and the truth had been spoken without being filtered through the expectations of people who only saw me as a tool. My phone buzzed. A text came from my mother. The planner called Marcus. Why did you have to involve outsiders in the family business? I read it once, then set the phone face down on the railing. Family business, as if I hadn't been the one running it all along. The sunset was beautiful that evening, deep orange fading into purple. I watched it until the last light disappeared, feeling something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. By the end of the week, the atmosphere had shifted from a private family dispute to a public crisis. The venue had updated its records. Julia Thorne, the wedding planner, had confirmed a new point of contact, one that did not include me. My family was scrambling to manage a situation they had never prepared for, simply because they had spent years assuming I would always be there to absorb the impact of their failures. I was not there anymore, and the void I left behind was rapidly swallowing their carefully constructed lies. The final confirmation request arrived on Tuesday morning. It was a formal email from Riverside Events sent to every party involved Marcus, my parents, his fiancée Amanda, and for the first time, her parents, Richard and Catherine Sterling. This is a final notice regarding the Miller-Sterling reception, the email read. The outstanding balance of $47,000 must be received within 48 hours to maintain the reservation. We require formal confirmation of the responsible party and valid payment authorization. Failure to comply will result in immediate cancellation of all services. I read it twice. I knew exactly what my family was expecting. They were waiting for me to see the sterling names on that carbon copy line and panic. They expected me to rush in, save them one last time, and prevent a public scandal at any cost. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into my accounting software. I pulled up the transaction history from the past 18 months. It was not just a list of numbers. It was a roadmap of my brother's entitlement. I watched the progression of his greed unfold in neat columns. There were the essential venue deposits and catering installments from the early spring, but those were quickly overshadowed by what I called the vanity invoices. I saw the thousands of dollars spent on cinematic drone packages, the lighting upgrades Marcus insisted were necessary for his image, and the rare orchids Amanda's mother preferred. Each line represented a piece of my hard-earned revenue funneled through my father's account to keep the fiction of their wealth alive. I exported the entire history into a single portable document format file, clean, professional, and undeniable. Then I composed my response. Dear Riverside Events Management, I wrote, thank you for your communication regarding the Miller Sterling reception. I am writing to formally confirm that I am no longer involved in the financial coordination of this event. All previous payments were made by me as a personal courtesy to my family and do not represent an ongoing contractual commitment. I continued making the situation crystal clear. For your records, I have attached a complete payment history documenting every transfer I made from my business account, Miller Logistics Limited Liability Company, to my father's personal account, which were then forwarded to your venue and associated vendors. This documentation includes dates, amounts, and purposes for each transaction. Please direct all future inquiries and invoices to the primary event organizers, Marcus Miller and Robert Miller. I read the draft 3 times, attached the audit file, and pressed send. Within an hour, my phone began vibrating so violently it nearly slid off my desk. Mom, Dad, Marcus, they were calling in desperate overlapping sequences. I did not answer. Instead, I opened my email tracking software and watched the read receipts flicker to life like a row of falling dominoes. Marcus opened it first, followed by my father 5 minutes later. Then the real impact landed. Julia Thorne opened it, and within seconds, both Richard and Catherine Sterling had accessed the attachment. The digital silence that followed was heavier than any phone call. I imagined the scene in New York Amanda showing her parents the email, the confusion in their eyes, and the sudden sharp realization. Who is Sarah? Why was the driver paying for the entire wedding? And Marcus standing there in the middle of a lie he could no longer sustain, unable to explain why his sister was the primary guarantor of his lifestyle. The questions began flowing immediately. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia Thorne. Just received your documentation. This is comprehensive. Thank you for the clarity, Ms. Miller. We will be in touch with your brother directly. Then a call came through on my office line. I answered without checking the identification. It was my mother. Her voice was barely above a whisper, cracked with horror and shame. What have you done? She asked. I clarified my role, Mom. You embarrassed Marcus in front of the Sterlings, in front of Amanda's parents. Do you understand what you have done to this family? I stopped hiding his dependence on me, I replied, my voice steady. That is all. I stopped being the invisible bank for a life he claimed he built himself. That document? Everyone saw it. Everyone knows now. Knows what, Mom? That I paid for everything, that I built the wedding he told me I was too poor to attend. I gripped the phone tighter. The truth is only embarrassing when it reveals a lie you did not want anyone to see. Silence followed. Then she spoke again, her voice trembling. Catherine Sterling called Amanda. She is asking questions Marcus cannot answer. Richard is demanding to see the bank statements. Then maybe Marcus should start telling the truth for the first time in his life. She hung up without another word. Later that night, Marcus sent a text. No calls, just 6 words, "You did not have to do this." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied my first response to him in days. You are right. I did not have to do any of it. I did not have to pay for your apartment, your car, or your wedding. I chose to support you for 20 years. Now I am choosing not to." The three dots appeared, disappeared, and appeared again. Then nothing. He had no response because there was no defense left. The next few days were a flurry of frantic activity on their end. My parents scrambled to find money to cover the gap. Marcus was forced into agonizing conversations with the Sterlings. Richard Sterling, I learned later, had asked him directly, "Did you know your sister was funding this entire event while you were looking down on her?" The polished facade of the successful self-made golden child was cracking. For the first time, someone was asking Marcus to prove he was who he claimed to be, and he was failing. I watched it all from a distance. It was not with satisfaction or vindication. It was just with the quiet recognition that the truth once visible could never be hidden again. Power did not come from what I gave. It came from what I stopped giving. And for the first time, everyone could see exactly what that meant. 3 days before the wedding, Marcus called again. The bravado was gone. The sharp Manhattan edge that usually defined his voice had been blunted into something unrecognizable. He sounded hollow, a bone-deep exhaustion that only comes when the facade you have built your entire life upon finally starts to crumble under its own weight. I sat in my kitchen, watching the gray rain streak against the window. On my laptop, the payroll for my drivers was open. 23 families depended on me to keep the wheels turning. I let the silence stretch until it became an interrogation. "Sarah," he said, his voice cracking on my name. "The venue just flagged the wire. They are talking about a breach of contract." I said nothing. I did not give him the "what happened" he was fishing for. I know I handled things poorly. The email was a mistake. I was under immense pressure from the Sterlings, and I took it out on the one person who has always been there. He paused, a shaky breath hitching in his throat. "I am sorry. I am truly sorry." I listened past the words, looking for the pivot. In my world, apologies, without a change in behavior, are just marketing. It did not take long. "I need you to bridge this, Sarah. Not because I deserve it, I know I do not. But the final walkthrough is tomorrow morning, and if the balance is not cleared, Amanda's father is going to see the cancellation notice. He is already asking why the family trust is suddenly frozen." For a split second, a ghost of the old me stirred. The sister who lived to be the savior. The one who found her worth in being the only person who could fix the unfixable. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "What exactly do you want from me, Marcus?" "Just authorize the final transfer. One last time. I will make it right the moment the honeymoon is over, I swear. I will make it right." "How?" I interrupted. "You are looking for a line of credit, not a reconciliation. You do not have a plan for my dignity, Marcus. You never did. You do not want a sister. You want a bailout that keeps your lie alive. That is not... You want the fire out, and I am the only one holding the water. That is the only reason you are calling." His voice dropped to a whisper, stripped of all artifice. "Please, Sarah, just this once. My future is on the line." It is never just once. It is every invoice, every crisis, every moment you need someone to carry the weight while you take the credit. I have been the foundation for 20 years, and you never once asked if I was okay with the pressure. You only noticed the floor when it started giving way under your feet. "I did not realize how much you were doing," he muttered, "because you never looked. You did not want to see the cost as long as the service was free." The line clicked. 2 more breaths joined the call, my mother's anxious, shallow inhalation and my father's heavy, authoritative baritone. They were huddled together in some plush New York hotel suite, finally realizing that the person who made their world look easy had walked away. "Sarah," my mother pleaded, "please, for the sake of the family. The Sterlings are arriving for dinner in 3 hours." "Which family, Mom? The one that uninvited me because I was an embarrassment? Or the one that decided my value was 0 until the check bounced?" "Sarah," my father's voice, cut in sharp and transactional, "name your terms. What is it going to take to make this go away?" He was not offering empathy. He was calculating the cost of my compliance, trying to buy my silence like he had bought everything else with my money. "I want the truth acknowledged," I said, out loud. in front of the people you are so afraid of. What does that mean? It means I want Marcus to tell Amanda and her parents exactly who has been funding his life. I want the guests to know why I am not at that table. I want the lie to end. If I am the one paying for the stage, I am done being hidden behind the curtain. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear the New York traffic through their window, a world moving on, while theirs stood still on a dead phone line. "I cannot do that," Marcus whispered. "It would destroy everything I have built with them. They would look at me like a fraud." "Then you built a house on San Marcos. That is not my problem to solve." "Sarah, you are being unreasonable," my mother cried. "We can sit down and talk about roles after the wedding. Just do not do this now." "We have been a family for 32 years, Mom. When exactly was the after supposed to start?" My father tried one last time, his voice hardening. "Are you really willing to burn your brother's future over your pride?" "It is not pride, Dad. It is a boundary. And yes, I am willing to let him face the consequences of his own choices. I am done being the safety net for a family that does not even want to admit I exist." There was nothing left to try, no more levers to pull. I had outgrown the role they assigned me, and they had no idea how to handle a version of me that did not break. "I am going to hang up now," I said quietly. "I hope the wedding goes well. I hope you find a way to explain the glitch to the Sterlings. And I hope someday you understand that you did not lose a driver. You lost the only person who actually had your back. Sarah, wait." I ended the call. The rain had stopped. The kitchen was silent save for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat there for a long time feeling the strange light sensation of a weight finally being set down. They wanted mercy, but they did not want to grant me my reality. They wanted me to be the bigger person so they could continue being the smaller ones. I finally understood that power was not about vengeance. It was the simple, quiet ability to say no and the courage to mean it. Mercy that requires the burial of the truth is not mercy. It is just more silence. And I was finally done being quiet. The wedding happened, and I was not there. I witnessed the aftermath through the cold lens of social media fragmented posts and secondhand whispers from distant relatives. The grand ballroom at the riverside had been traded for a cramped venue where the elegance Marcus had promised looked like a thin coat of paint over a crumbling wall. It was an event held together by the visible strain of a man whose facade had finally shattered. Marcus managed to save the day, but the price was total surrender. To avoid a public cancellation, he had been forced to beg the Sterling family for a loan. They provided the funds to preserve their daughter's reputation, but the money arrived with heavy permanent chains. 2 weeks later, a cousin sent me a screenshot of a private update. Marcus was moving. The Manhattan loft was gone, replaced by a nondescript 2-bedroom apartment in a borough far from the prestige he craved. The finance whiz, who once scoffed at my logistics business, was now required to submit a monthly financial report to Richard Sterling. I imagined him sitting at a small kitchen table, proving his worthiness cent by cent to a father-in-law who looked at him with undisguised disappointment. He had traded my invisible support for a life under a microscope. He was no longer the golden child. He was a managed liability. In the months that followed, the ripples of my absence turned into a permanent tide. I noticed the strange, empty space in family photos and the quiet hesitation of relatives who no longer knew my name. I did not offer explanations. I did not need to. The truth has a unique way of emerging through the cracks of a broken home. 6 months later, my phone buzzed with a call I had not expected. It was my father. His voice, once a pillar of authority, now sounded thin and brittle. "Sarah," he said, the words cracking, "your mother and I, things have been tight. With Marcus needing help to remain afloat, we have dipped into our own retirement more than we planned." I waited the silence on my end, a solid, immovable wall. "We were wondering," he continued, "if you could see your way to a short-term loan. Just $20,000. To bridge the gap. We are family, Sarah. We should be able to rely on each other." "Family relies on each other, Dad," I said, my voice level. But I am just the driver. Remember, I do not have money like that. You should probably ask Marcus. He is the one in finance. Sarah, please do not be like this. I am being exactly who you told me I was, I replied. I did not wait for his excuse. I ended the call and blocked his number, then my mother's. It was not an act of revenge. It was the final closing of a door. That afternoon, I stood in the yard of my new headquarters. My logistics business had not just grown, it had soared. Without the parasitic drain on my finances, I had found a reservoir of energy I did not know I possessed. I had just signed a contract with a national retailer, doubling my fleet overnight. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the fresh asphalt. In front of me sat 4 brand-new, heavy-duty delivery trucks, their white paint gleaming in the twilight. I walked to the nearest one and ran my hand along the cold steel of the bumper. For years I had delayed this expansion to keep Marcus's ego afloat. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. I am in a hole, Sarah. The Sterlings are threatening to cut Amanda off if I do not increase my payments. Please, just this once. I did not feel the urge to reply. I looked at the trucks that represented my hard-won reality. I did not need a seat at Marcus's table when I had built an entire empire of my own. I signaled to my foreman. The new decals are ready. Yes, ma'am, he said, holding up a silver stencil. I watched as the first truck was marked. The name Miller Logistics was gone. The new logo was clean, bold, and entirely mine. It read SM Strategic Solutions. I was stripping the family name from my success, just as they had stripped my name from their celebration. I did not lose my place in the family. I simply chose where I belonged. Looking back, I feel only a cold and beautiful clarity. I see the patterns that shaped us, and the invisible rules we were expected to follow. I see how easy it was to become the foundation, and how hard it was for anyone to notice until the structure began to lean. I am not the driver. I never was. I was the engine, the fuel, and the navigator. I pulled my phone out one last time, deleted Marcus's message, and permanently deleted his contact. Then I turned off the screen and walked toward my office. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and let the truth speak for itself. And if the truth is a silence they can no longer fill, that is not my burden to carry. I am moving now, not for them, not against them, but simply for myself.